All right, hey everybody. In this video, we are going to be looking at pages 8, 9, and 10. And you might remember that we picked up, or we stopped, I should say. We stopped in our last video at the top part of page 8. And so we'll be picking up right here, kind of in the middle of page 8, and then we'll be eventually going to pages 9 and 10, like I said. Now, a quick refresher, though, just from our last class from the last video, that for the domain is when you're scanning along the x-axis from left to right. And here we scan and see a point there at 0 and then again at over 1. So we only have to list the 1 once. And then for the range, we scan and we see something at -2, and then something again at 3, and then something again at 5, which is where we got those numbers listed in the braces here. So at this time, we're going to kind of just start now with the slope and y-intercept and how to identify them. And the goal is that you can identify them if I give you an equation in y equals mx plus b form. Now, just so you guys know where we're going with this, you might remember that all the way back on page 3, actually, all the way back on page 3, you guys had this input-output table, and then you came over here and you just plotted those points. The goal for today is to actually look at the equation and identify something called a slope and a y-intercept, and then see over here how to graph them, and then to eventually not even need this input-output table. That would be the goal, is to not even need this input-output table, and to see that if this is a -1, we should see a -1 here, and if this is a 3, we're going to see how to build a staircase of the up 3 and then over 1. This would go up 3 over 1, up 3 over 1. So already, now that I pointed it out, some of y'all are like, oh snap, that number and this number tell me something about the graph. And so today we're just going to focus on how to identify these numbers, and then in our next class we're actually going to learn how to use these numbers to build the graph. Okay? So I want you guys now with me on page 8, and I'm going to flip over into my Google Slides just because they're a little more interactive so that you guys can be taking notes on this part with me. Okay? All right, so for the vocabulary here, all right, we've got a constant is a number that multiplies, a constant is a number that is all by itself, while a coefficient is a number that multiplies the variable. Now, in elementary school, you guys have definitely seen both constants and coefficients. This thing in red is called an expression, and this thing in red is what you guys see in your notes there in the middle of page 8. I wanted you guys to see the expression the way you've seen it in elementary school, that if you see this and that you notice that x and y are the variables, what you simply do is plug in the 8 and the 5. And when you see this expression in red, that 4 and that -3 actually get multiplied to become your 32 and the -15. And then you go on to get an overall answer of 19. Now, I don't want you guys to worry about taking notes on this part right here. The thing I actually care about pointing out is that the number that was all by itself that you just added at the end, that was called a constant. And the numbers here, the 4 and the -3, those things got multiplied by whatever you plugged in. And that's what we mean by definition. Coefficient is a number that multiplies a variable. Okay. Now, a coefficient is always written to the left of the letter. So a 4x means to do multiply by 4. All right. Now, on our next slide here, we've got y-intercept and slope. So underlined in red is the stuff that you guys need to fill in your notes. The y-intercept is going to be where the line crosses the y-axis, and the slope is the steepness of the line. So when you guys see that equation, y equals mx plus b, the number all by itself at the end there, that's going to tell us where it should cross the y-axis. And the coefficient of x, the thing in green, that should tell us how steep the line is. Think about if I say we're going to go hit the slopes, that means I'm talking about we're going to go skiing or snowboarding. And sometimes there's really steep, scary mountains, and sometimes there's like bunny slopes that aren't so bad. So we're going to talk about what type of number you see in this green spot would make it like a really scary mountain versus what type of number would make it kind of a flatter mountain and you wouldn't be so scared to go skiing down it. Another thing I'll be reminding you guys throughout the unit today is, or the video today, is that when you input in x, you get an output of y, and that was what got plotted on the coordinate plane. So I'm going to actually go back real quick to that page 3 to show you guys what I meant by that. you input here with a table of values, you input this 3, so 3 times 3, and then you take away 1, and that's where we got the 8. So you had an input and an output situation, and so you can use the x and y to make the table of values, or you can use here the 3 and the -1 to again go straight to the graph, and you'll have something here at the -1, and we're going to explore again how the 3 makes the line pretty steep. All right, so let's see where we're at here. We are at the bottom of page 8. All right, cool. So at the bottom of page 8, I'm just going to kind of talk to you guys about something called the parent graph. And you can go ahead and jot this down where you see y equals 1x plus 0. What that means, y'all, is that this graph is going to cross at the origin because of the plus 0. So there I've gone ahead and plotted that. And then because the coefficient is this orange 1 as a fraction, that's 1 over 1. So it's going to build this little staircase up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over, and up and over. And you might remember from elementary school that a negative divided by a negative is also positive. So you can move from that green point, you can move down and back and plot, you can move down and back and plot, and down and back and plot. And it's going to graph this line, again, called the parent graph. And how you see it written here in blue, that's actually how it's really written, because we have these identity properties from elementary school that say 1 times x is just x, and anything plus 0 is just itself, so I don't have to write plus 0 ever. So anytime you see y equals x, it's this 1 and this 0 that are kind of hidden in the background. And again, we call this thing the parent graph. So flip over with me now. We're at the top of page 9. And you can see at the top of page 9, I've actually already got the parent graph for you. And what we're going to do now is just explore briefly a positive constant. If you see the equation y equals x plus 1, that means that it's going to cross at 0, 1. Go ahead and jot that down in your notes. There's a place for you to put that on page 9. So now we're going to see our yellow point simply moved up 1 spot. It's the same line, the same staircase in the background. It's just simply moved up 1 spot. And if you see a y equals x plus 2, that's simply going to move it. Let me get this, sorry. That moves it up to 2. It's going to cross here at 0, 2. Again, same line, it just moved up to 0, 2. So if you see a positive constant, your line will be crossing above the origin. All right, now let's see some negative constants. All right, again, parent graph up here, the understood 1 and 0 that crosses at the origin, and then you see that up 1 over 1 staircase in the background. So this one, if you see x minus 1, it's now going to cross below the origin. See how it now has a point at 0, -1? So that's the same line, it's just now down 1 spot. And similarly, for y equals x minus 2, if it's now minus 2, okay, cool. And now it's going to cross at -2. So it's the same line, it's just moved down to 0, -2. Now in your notes, you guys see here 3 blank spaces, and on my slides, I've got a word bank for you. You can use the word bank to fill in those 3 blanks, but at this time I just want you to pause the video and try to fill in those 3 blanks and then hit play and see if you got them right, okay? All right, so right here, the blanks were filled in with the words y-intercept above and below. So the constant tells us where it's going to cross, which is the y-intercept. If it's a positive constant, it's going to be above the origin. If it's a negative constant, it would be below the origin. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to move away from this plus or minus number at the end. And we're going to go back to the parent graph where it's this understood plus 0. So again, this plus 0 is understood, which is why it's going to cross right here at the origin. And we're going to forget about that thing for a while, and now we're going to focus on this thing, the coefficient, and talk about how it impacts the steepness of the line. All right, cool. So again, we are at the bottom of page 9, and the parent graph is already there for you. So if this now turns into a 2x, Again, it's still going to cross at the origin, so I got the same starting point, and you can see it here on my slide in blue. But this time my coefficient is a 2. And as a fraction, that's 2 over 1. So my staircase now gets a little steeper. I'm going up 2, then over 1, up 2, then over 1. And you guys, again, remember that a negative divided by negative is also a positive, so I could go down and back, and then down and back. And this would be the equation of the graph of the line y equals 2x. Now, the thing I did over here in red, the thing I did on the coordinate plane, that's kind of tricky, and we're going to have a whole other lesson devoted to how to graph the line. But today I just care that you see that this thing is technically a 0, and that we're going to identify this as a 2 over 1. Now, when we compare that red line to my original parent graph, we can see that that mountain got a little scarier, or a little steeper, if you will. Okay? Now we are on page 10, and we're going to talk about if it goes now to a 3x. So again, still crosses at the origin, because I don't see a plus or a minus number. It's technically a plus 0. And then the slope here is going to be a 3 over 1 as a fraction. So this time it goes up 3 over 1. And even though it feels like you're going to run out of room on the graph, you can still kind of estimate where that next point's going to be. You could also go down and back, and then down and back. And that would be the equation 3x graphed now on the coordinate plane. And you can see if I put the other two graphs back up, we have the parent graph, and then we have the red line that we just did. So you can see the parent graph, and then the red line, and then the green line, it's getting steeper because we're going from a 1x to a 2x to a 3x. So a 4x and a 5x, those would be even steeper. And in our next class, we're going to talk about how to get this parent graph a little flatter. For example, if you were to go up 1 and then over 3, so like if you saw 1/3 x, that's how it's going to be a little flatter. But we'll deal with that in our next class, okay? All right, here we're going to practice. We're on page 10 in your notes. We're going to practice together. Just if you see an equation, how to identify the slope and the y-intercept, what m and b are. Again, it's the same thing as being able to identify a coefficient and a constant. All right, cool. So if we're going to look for the y-intercept first to see where it crosses, we just got to ask ourselves, what's the constant? So in this first one, the constant is a 5, so it's going to cross at 0, 5. All right, the coefficient is a 1, so as a fraction, 1 over 1. Done. All right, the next one, y equals negative x plus 2. So the constant, plus 2. Coefficient, negative 1, so negative 1 over 1. Done. For the third one here, constant, 1, so it crosses at 0, 1. Coefficient is a negative 3, so negative 3 over 1. Done. Couple of things real quick. Make sure you're putting your answers here in parentheses, that you're listing them as ordered pairs. And we're going to talk in our next class about if it's negative, which one of these technically gets the negative. It doesn't matter. It's going to be one or the other. So for today, I just have the negative out in front. And we're going to again see in our next class that if it is negative, it goes with one or the other when we're actually graphing it. Now in our final example here, we're okay with the crossing below the origin at a negative 1. And we haven't seen one yet where the coefficient's already a fraction. So you might have seen that in all of these so far, we've had to put it over 1. We don't need to do that for this one. If it's already a fraction, the slope is a 5 over 2, so we'd go up 5 over 2, up 5 over 2, up 5 over 2. But again, we'll look at that in the next class. Now I want you to put your pen or pencils down. And for this next part, I just want you to look at the screen. And we're just going to practice. We're going to do this just together, and I'm going to just reveal the answers. So I want you to kind of visualize for the first one, 5x plus 3. Where does it cross? All right, and then what would you see pop up here for the slope? All right, cool. Now let's go over to this next one. Just ask yourself, where is it going to cross? And what are you going to see here for the staircase slope? Negative 5 over 1. All right, we're on the third example down here. Just say, where does it cross? And then, okay, negative 1/2 is going to be the slope. And in the final example, this one would cross at negative 1. And its slope is going to be the 2/3. So that's what the goal of today's independent practice is going to be all about, is can you identify the constant and the coefficient, aka the slope and the y-intercept. All right. Now on this next slide, we're going to go through this. I'm actually going to fill this out with you all. This is the table that you guys see at the bottom of page 10. And you're going to take notes at the bottom of page 10 while I type them in along the way here. Let me actually change the color to red so that it stands out a little bit. All right, here we go. So if you're trying to just look at the equation and simply identify the m as a fraction, in the first one, the slope is a 3, so we'd put it over 1. And this one crosses at 0, 1. This is the number I looked at. I'll put that in orange just so it stands out. That's the number I looked at to make this decision right here. Okay? And this number in green is the number I looked at to make this decision right here. All right, sweet. So for the next one, the coefficient is a 1, so I'm going to put 1 over 1. And it would cross at a 0, negative 2. So I'm typing it in here as we go along. You're writing it in your notes. You're actually going to see a slide like this in your independent practice, and so I'm just demonstrating how you're going to type in your answers as fractions as you go. And make sure you put your answers as ordered pairs here. All right, for the next one, it's already a fraction, so I'm going to put a 2/3. And for this one, it's going to cross at 0, negative 1. Now this one, our coefficient, is already a fraction, so we're good to go. And remember, if you don't see a plus or a minus number, those are the ones that are going to cross at the origin, so just be careful with that, the origin. This one's going to be, the slope is going to be a negative 8 over 1, and it'll also cross at the origin. Because again, technically it's like seeing right here a plus 0, but you don't have to see that plus 0 to know that it's a 0. All right, so that takes care of the notes. You should have everything filled out and everything up through page 10. So you're going to see a couple of things today. This is going to be your independent practice. You're going to have a slide like this, which is one we just did. And you're going to have a slide like this where you're matching. And I actually have a demonstration. I'm going to do a demo real quick. You can see that this slide is called demo. I'm going to show you guys how you basically are just going to match these up. Some of you are going to want to start over here and say, okay, if I have a negative 2x minus 4, I'm looking for something that's going to cross at minus 4. So you might then start to look over here and say, okay, where do I see my 0 minus 4? And it was right here. And then, of course, if this is a negative 2, there's the negative 2 over 1. So some of you are going to start over here in green and then go find what it should be. Others of you, for example, are going to look right here and say, okay, if this is a 1/3 and this is the origin, I'm just looking for a 1/3 x, and then you're going to come over here and find it. Doesn't matter, but that's the goal, is to match them up. So for example, if we're looking here for a 1 over 1, and then this is crossing at 0, 3, I'm looking for something plus 3, plus 3, plus 3. That's the plus 3. And because that's technically a 1 right there, that's my 1 over 1. All right, the 1/4 right here crosses at minus 2. And my 4 over 1 crosses at minus 2. So you're going to have a matching activity to do in your slides as well. So I just want to make sure you're good to go. We took care of everything on page 10, and we did fill out this chart together. And at this time, you're going to pop over to Schoology, and on your slides, you're going to fill out this table, and you're going to have this matching and for the independent practice. There's also a Google form after that, and that concludes today's video. Thank you. You can see that.